Okay, welcome to Power Pivots, the podcast where we explore the stories behind the fundamental career shifts and changes that have made all the difference. I'm your host, I go by Hatu, and today we are joined by
Brandon
Roberson. Hello, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I cannot complain. I'm really excited to talk to you. Obviously, we've been trying to get this conversation on the books.
Tell him.
Brandon, I was like that.
No, put me out there.
Oh my God. You're in high demand. But no, on a serious note, I know that there are a lot of people who are going to be very interested and can learn a lot from the move that you've made from education to corporate. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to you more about that.
Yeah. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So for anybody who has been here before, you know exactly how we do it. We get right down to the PowerPoints. So PowerPoints are 3 words or phases that describe you, encapsulate you as much as possible, as much as 3 words or phrases can do. So Brandon, what would you say your PowerPoints are?
I'm going to start with one that feels like you shouldn't call it out as a PowerPoint, but humility. Whether it's because I grew up in a household with a very strong father who taught me deference and to know my place and position, but also own that space and position until you occupy the next one. Humility has always been something that's kind of been an undertone of me growing up. I think the second one is being adaptive. So whether, it started really early for me. I was a musician growing up, played piano, took piano lessons, and then adapted the music reading to convert that to playing the drums and reading music on the drums, and then use that to pivot into a college study of music and learn a bunch of different instruments. And so kind of adapting one skill to a different place. And then another one I think is just being inquisitive or inquiry, right? So asking questions, because I've always found that I learn best by taking those moments to just, oh, you say this thing, what does that mean? What is that? Tell me more. And being inquisitive has always led me to have a deeper understanding of topics that will eventually benefit me down the road. It's part of how my career has opened up in the ways that it has.
Okay. Humility, adaptive, and inquisitive or inquiry. It sounds like you practice.
No. I mean, I know how to answer questions.
On that inquiry. But yeah, so that was fantastic. Okay, very good. I'm sure we'll explore a little bit more about how we got to those 3 or how you narrowed it down to those 3. But I want to learn a little bit more about you. They always say that the story is told in hindsight, and hindsight is 2020. So if you're looking back from a 2020 perspective, Brandon, what would you say is your hindsight story?
Yeah, I feel like I'm just blessed. Honestly, a combination of the right place at the right time, people who were looking out for me, a strong network, and really being able to not only state my strengths, but demonstrate them on an ongoing basis has kind of led me to where I am. And I could take it all the way back to before college, right? Like I said, I played music, and music put me in different spaces and gained me favor from folks who were looking after me. And that earned me recognition and scholarship money that led me to college. And then in college, I met a network of us folks, right, to really support me and put me in position, me in places where I became an RA, which paid for my housing for 2 or 3 years, which then gave me an opportunity to join for Teach for America. And then that led me to a different network. So it's all these different interactions and combinations where yes, I knew people. Yes, I had knowledge. Yes, I was in certain spaces. But when I got to those spaces, I had to demonstrate the strengths that people recommended me for being there. Right. So, I can only say that because of that, I'm blessed, right? I've been able to activate a number of different skills in the environments that I've been put in and demonstrate and be successful in those spaces when I'm allowed to.
Okay. All right. So just kind of taking it from there. So you obviously, like you said, after college, you decided to do TFA or Teach for America. I guess talk me through how did you decide to do Teach for America? And there is a certain term of service, if I'm not mistaken, right? Of how long you're in the Corps. Yeah. So after that, I guess what was your process of thinking of what you wanted to do after your term of service was TFA?
Yeah. So, I was in college I think I graduated in 2007. I know I graduated in 2007. I had to double check the numbers. But around that time, there was this big, not a scandal, but a big kind of news story was UCLA had let in like the fewest amount of African American males in the history of the school. And that was like my sophomore, junior year. There was a big movement in the UCs to figure out how to increase African American presence on the UC campuses. And so people took different approaches. There was a organization called the ABC Coalition, which I think still goes in the UCs today, and now goes to the Cal States. That came out of that initiative. And for me, my personal contribution was like, hey, I think I want to go to the classroom. Like, I want to go teach in the classroom. And I called my shot. I said, I want to teach Black boys. I told TFA that, and they placed me in South Central Los Angeles. I was on Florence and Van Ness. I was at a KIPP school, which meant I was like it was a charter school, high intensity, very intense program for parents, students, and the teachers. And I was teaching like 95% African American students with a Black principal and like 3 other Black male teachers on our staff. So I was really blessed to be there and see and learn from the community. I fell in love with Inglewood in LA in that time. And yeah, so that was like kind of my motivating factor. It was like, I want to be in the classroom teaching Black kids. So TFA gave me the opportunity. I stayed, the commitment is 2 years. I stayed for 6. So I finished my 2 years and I didn't feel like my work was done. I started the music department there and built it out over the 6 years that I was there. And once I got to a point where I felt like I had established something that could be lasting for that community and for that school, then I started to look for the opportunities that were going to get me closer to what I wanted my impact to be.
Okay. All right. And obviously, and I can't state this enough, the impact that teachers have is so much, right, for others. And it's like there's so many ramifications. My brothers and I talk about this all the time. I could probably name every teacher that I had, and still to this day, the opinions that I had of them and how effective they were or were not from pre-K to the time that I graduated, like college, right? There's that much impact. But, I know that it's very demanding on one person, being the teacher or an educator, being that for everybody, right? Yeah. Whether it's the parents, whether it's the kids that are in the school, whether it's other faculty and staff, right? So, as you think about like what you wanted your impact to be outside of the classroom, like how were you thinking through that? And what was that process like of deciding to leave the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, it was rough at first. Like, I honestly felt like I was selling myself out a little bit because I was the guy who was like, oh, I used to always talk about the Teach for America folks that would come in, cycle in, do a year and leave, or do that 2 years and go to law school. And even though I had been there for 6 years, I had seen multiple classes graduate. I had like established myself as someone in that community. I still felt like, man, I was leaving my kids behind, right? And the reality I had was I was actually looking for the way to increase the impact I could have. So I actually left the classroom to work at kind of another angle of education, which was college track. And there I was working with high school students, and I was really pushing from outside of the classroom to help them be college ready. It was a program that established scholarship money, all kinds of big opportunities for students. I switched demographics because then I went to go work over in Boyle Heights and learned a whole lot about the community impact there and all the different resources available to students. I learned more about the immigrant experience for students and what they deal with in terms of students who are first gen, who actually don't qualify for financial aid, who are dreamers, and wanting to work with that group as well. So it was a different impact, but it definitely did feel like I was leaving my students. And one of the things I'll just point out here that's really hard, it's not always the impact you're having on the students, because when you stay long enough, you start to see what happens when the students don't follow the path that you've laid out for them, or maybe have different pressures and impacts on them. So, I mean, I remember still teaching and seeing some of the students I sent to high school, end up, in jail or not living after a couple of years, which is the tragic part of being a teacher in the schools that I was working in. But then also seeing students who went on and were valedictorian of their schools, got full ride scholarships to Ivy Leagues, and did some of the life achievements that they were dreaming about when they were with you. So it is a roller coaster ride when it comes to being a teacher. But I would say it's one of the most rewarding and most difficult jobs. To this day, it's the most difficult job I've ever had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that the stakes are so much higher, right? I think that a lot of times, like, you can work a lot of different jobs and it feels like the stake is high until what you're doing is directly correlated to what somebody else is able to achieve, right?
100%.
So, okay, so you left the classroom and you moved on to this other organization and were able to kind of shift the perspective of like what you were working on and kind of like broaden the scope. And for those who are not aware, Boyle Heights, the community is mainly Latinx immigrant community, correct?
Yeah, it was like I went from 95% African American students to literally like 99.9% Latinx students. So
Right. Yep. So you had that experience, and then I guess what was your thinking there after an amount of time, and I guess how did you decide to move on?
yeah, so one, I started to see the differences in resources, right? Like, for example, I went from a publicly funded charter school, which I saw how donors came to our charter schools and wanted to support. And I saw all of that. And then I went to the nonprofit side and was pushing from outside. And I saw even more of like, College Track is sponsored, was founded by Lorraine Powell Jobs, right? And so there's a whole group of folks from the Emerson Collective, which is this group of folks who have a lot of money and support causes. And it was just amazing. Like, they are giving kids full ride scholarships, like multiple kids every year across multiple sites around the country are a part of this program and giving full ride scholarships. And so I felt like I was well served there. I feel like I was really supporting the students there, but I kept having this nagging feeling like, man, I wanted to see more students graduate from college, right? And pushing from the classroom was one way, pushing from outside the classroom was another one. But then I was like, I wanted to get back on a university campus and be the push that people were giving me when I was there, right? Like, and so I actually found my way to my next move from College Track was to a small liberal arts college, Mount St. Mary's University, right here in LA. It's a historically women's institution, parochial school. So that was a space for me to really get a glimpse of how to support students in higher ed. I was over the Student Learning Center. I supported all the Summer Bridge programs. I was the guy who supported all the students who got put on academic probation. So it was my job to make sure that you got back in good standing. So it was a lot of exactly the work that I felt like I wanted to do. And so was there for about 4 or 5 years and took that opportunity to also deeply understand my craft more. And so I went and got my doctorate in education leadership from USC while I was working there. So, yeah.
Okay. So, and it's very interesting in your journey, right? It seems like going back to that PowerPoint, that inquiry and that curiosity of like, okay, what's next, right? Of I've been in the classroom and this is showing me part of this journey, but how else do I support and how else do I make sure that this impact continues? I'm going to go on to the next step and learn more about that, right?
Yeah.
And then you're getting kids scholarships who are going to do all these great things and be able to move on to the next step. And you're like, all right, like let's understand more about the beast that is higher ed in its own right and all the different aspects that people don't necessarily focus on as much as just get them into the classroom and then 4 years, good luck, figure it out. Right. But there's a whole bunch we all know and we all have stories for days of how there's a whole bunch that goes on in those 4 years that students need support.
Yeah. And I also learned there's so much you can't do from outside. Like you like even when I was at College Track, like we could throw money, we can give students money to support, but like if they didn't know how to study when they got into campus, or they didn't know how to go and have a conversation with a professor, or they didn't know how to connect with people on campus. Or the other big issue we had a bunch of students who were commuting to campus. And so they were college students, but they were also still babysitting, still working at mom's shop and like trying to like do all the home stuff. And they were never committing to the student experience, which was a huge part of the success factors, particularly for like first gen students of minoritized students, is like really engulfing yourself in the university experience. But that often comes with money and different like things that folks can't all do, right? Like not everybody has the privilege of not being able to work and just go to school. So you don't know that until you really get on campus and you're the person who's sitting down and talking to every single person about like, hey, why is it you can't go to this class that's on Thursdays?
Right. Right. So yeah, no, exactly. And at that point you've understood the foundational blocks of one, just education just throughout, right? It sounds like from middle school up until, college graduation, essentially.
Yeah.
And then also for, certain communities where it's more difficult and there's some certain factors where it's not just, all right, just get there and just do it. Well, no, there's a lot more that goes on,
Yeah.
right? And there are a lot of different factors that you have to take into consideration. So you gone on, you got your PhD, right? PhD in education, correct?
Yeah.
So at that point, did you say, this is where I'm going to stay? I'm going to be in academia for the rest of my career. I'm a lifelong educator or a lifelong member of academia. What was your thinking at that standpoint?
Yeah, it was really interesting. This is where the pivot started to happen, right?
Okay.
Well, because the reality was, I was in a doctoral program where like inquiry was the role, like ask questions, push, probe, learn more. And then like at the same time, I'm hearing from professors and people who are at USC telling me like, you have a strong skill set. Why are you at this place? Or what do you want to do? And so I was looking originally to pivot into the community colleges, right? I was like, that's where a lot of my students ended up from middle school. There was a lot of legislation that was making the community colleges a much more friendly place for, I felt, minoritized students to actually transition and get their degrees without having the burden of like debt and all these other things on them. There was a lot of programs coming out. And so my study, my research was actually in community college students. Okay. But I found like I was increasingly just turned off from like trying to be someone who was passionate about this space. Because what you should know is like every place I've been at, my passion kind of led me there, right? I was passionate about educating Black kids. So I went to a school where I was doing that. I was passionate about wanting to have a bigger impact and push from outside the classroom. And I found a place that allowed me to do that. I was passionate about supporting college students on a college campus. And I found a place to do that. I could not find a place that was willing to embrace my passion in the community college space. Everything was kind of like a shut door of like, you don't have this, this, and this, or you have an adjunct for this. I have my doctorate degree. I have 12 years of experience at this point in academia and in education. And it just boggled my mind. And so, when you hit a bunch of places where you're like, you don't feel like it's going to be a place where you're welcomed and received, you start to read the messaging, right? So I actually did. And I said, you know what? Like, I know that where I'm at, I don't feel like, at this point I was reporting to the provost of my school. Like he was my direct boss. And I was like, I don't see myself waiting 40 years to try to get the next level of role here. Like literally, I don't want to that is not what I'm setting myself up to. And I found that academia was very much a wait in line type of spot. And so I actually took my own advice and was like, okay, cool. What else do I like? Let's take a moment and analyze the situation. I know I like to educate people. I know I like to have an impact on people's lives. And I know that I can adapt and learn. Like I've been doing that my whole career. I've been doing that in every space I've been in so far. And so I happened to like get to the end of my dissertation. And I had a conversation with my mother-in-law actually, who was working kind of contract jobs for like Facebook and all these different places doing L&D. And she just told me, she was like, you could do this job. She's like, you could do this with your eyes closed. And I was like,
and what's L&D, Brandon?
L&D.
I know.
So essentially L&D is learning and development, right? So imagine like you get out of college and you learn how to code and do all the things that are like the core functions of your job. But there's all these other things that when you get to the job and you actually land there that you just need to learn how to do, whether it's like training on soft skills and how to collaborate with folks, whether it's like company specific like things that you have to train someone on, like a tech stack or like how to operate something that's specific to the company. So every company has like a team of people, at least one, that is responsible for learning and development and training. And sometimes it's internal and external, which is a whole nother podcast. And we'll talk about that another time. But I do internal training. So leadership, manager development, internal like communication, collaboration training, like getting people to connect, globally learn. That's my job. And so you're telling me that there's a job where I can go to a company and teach people how to do things. That I can teach with my eyes closed, right? I know how to work with students and folks from all ages at this point up to adult. So absolutely I can do this, right? And so that was the pivot. It was like take it out of formal academia, formal education, and put it into a space that is more corporate. Ultimately. Now, I think so far that pivot has worked out, right? And it actually, there was a couple things I had to do, like going back to this humility piece, right? At the time I was a director. The position that I got when I first came into corporate L&D was just a manager role. you know, and I had to shed off this whole like, oh, manager, like I've been a director, I've been, you know, like all this. It's like, no, let's just, you've been given an opportunity to operate in this space, demonstrate the strengths that you know that you can, and prove it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been at this spot for 3 years.
Yeah.
And in the last 3 years, I work at Riot Games, by the way. So, like, in the last 3 years at Riot Games, I've been promoted 3 times. I worked at Riot for 4 years, and I'm now a director again, which is different, I've learned, than in like the nonprofit academia space. That all the titles don't translate, but I've gotten back to a place where I know I can thrive and operate. And it's been, again, it's been due to inquiry, due to like really adapting my skills and being humble when I need to be humble to just show and demonstrate the things that I know I can do.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. First of all, he's being humble. That promotion track is quite astronomical. It's quite an accomplishment, I'm here to tell you. And, you know, there are so many great things that you've said there. First and foremost, I think one thing that you keep on repeating is like just being aware of the skills that you have, right? Yeah. I think a lot of times when people are in positions, finding transferable skills, which is the name of the game, is difficult for people to do. But it sounds like in every aspect or in every juncture of your career, you were very attuned to what transferable skills you had, which you had gained in the current position and which you would be looking to build upon.
Yeah.
Right. I guess what was your mindset there? Because I don't think it's something that people always necessarily do. But what was your process of making sure that you were keeping in touch with what your transferable skills were at that point?
I don't know that it was conscious, but like, again, you said hindsight is 20/20. But when I reflect back, I can track every crossover moment. Right?
Yeah.
Literally from, like I mentioned earlier, from like playing piano, the biggest thing I took away from learning to play piano was reading music, right? Then I took reading music and adapted it to drums where I was really passionate. And then I blew up there, right? Because I could read music better than every other drummer because I played piano, right?
Yeah.
Then from there, performing became the thing that I was really good at. And so when I take performing, which I studied all through college, and transition that into being a teacher, I'm now in front of 30 students, 6 periods a day, all day long, every day of the year, right? So I'm now honing these skills. And I did jazz, so I know how to improvise in the moment and move and pivot when something's happening. And so that performance mentality now translates into how I present to people, how I engage people, how I ask questions. And that has been like a rocket ship for any time I have to do something that is impacting people, in front of them, in the moment, even down to interviewing, right? Like every interview I've been in for a job feels like a conversation. And it's just because I know how to engage folks because I've done it hours and hours and hours at end, right? And so those skills transfer. And again, it builds out. Like I went from managing a classroom to managing adults, right?
Yeah.
And understanding the nuances of individual people's needs and having to adapt to them to make sure that you create a successful environment for them. Changing that from adults to students, to college students, to adults, to children. It's all the same essentially, but you just kind of tweak it a bit, right? Yeah. And then the last one was going from at learning in an academic setting, which is not that different than a corporation, people think, and learning how to like navigate faculty and staff and all the dynamics of that, putting that in a corporate setting, that's navigating leaders and senior leaders and executives needs. It's all the same stuff. It just looks different. And so it's like each of those situations has been like a transfer of its own. And again, in the moment, didn't know what it was. It was just me leaning in to what I knew how to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And the important there is being able to show and explain to other people, hey, it looks different, but I have the core foundational skill sets to be able to accomplish this. This is how I did it in my previous position.
Yes. Right. Yes.
Has Power Pivots inspired you to reevaluate your career path? If so, look into Power Pivots Career Coaching. Whether you're interested in career discovery, job description dissection, or interview prep, I take a tailored approach to helping you understand your ultimate career goals and get closer to them. Interested? Fill out the interest form at the bottom of the show notes for your free 30-minute consultation. For any questions, email hatu@powerpivots.co. That's HATU@powerpivots.co. As always, pivot powerfully. So I want to talk about something else that you mentioned, and I see in a lot of corporations or organizations rather, where there's a pretty large hierarchical structure, this concept of waiting in line, right? And I think that if it's something that you know this is where you're going to be, where you look up and you see the position that said person that you're waiting in line for, as you mentioned, for 40 years, that's where you want to eventually be, then that makes sense, right? But what would you say is the mechanism that you think makes sense to weigh whether you need to wait in line for a certain position or whether you just have to be patient?
Yeah.
Right. So waiting in line could be like, it's not your turn, you're not ready, right? Or on the other end, being patient is like, hey, I'm not getting promoted yet. I know that if I wait a little more, it's going to come. But I just need to be a little more patient. So what would you say is the best way to kind of weigh the difference between those two?
Yeah. So there's a couple things, right? And I'll use my personal experience. For me, the first mechanism is any place that waiting in line means that you have to devalue your skill set monetarily is something that you have to really consider. Right. Okay. So if waiting in line for 30 years means I am 30 years behind the earning curve of where I should be based on the skill sets I'm already giving you, then maybe this ain't the place for me to wait in line.
Yeah.
The other thing is like, what value am I able to add from where I'm at? Right. So like, I actually feel very good about my current position because I think I'm well equipped to really have strong impact pre-executive, but higher than just a manager. I can form strategy. I can allocate resources. I can get a team of people together and move and shake with them. Like, I feel like I'm really good in that space. I can wait in line here for a little while to one, determine if I want to go to that next level where there's a whole different set of rules that I have to play by. And two, if I'm going to be able to add the value that I'm going to feel comfortable with adding immediately the moment you unlock that position for me.
Yeah.
Now, when I was in higher education, I felt like me being in my position wasn't only waiting in line, but it was restricting the impact I could have. And that didn't feel comfortable for me. Right. And so one, if I'm feeling restrained and I'm feeling like you're not realizing the value I'm already giving you, then I got to find something else. Right. Yeah. Because those are triggers for personal frustration that really builds up and is hard to overcome when you're in a moment of stress or a moment where you have to really deliver something.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And it feels like when you're in that position where you're waiting in line, you're just being pushed off because there's no opportunity there. And I've had conversations with people of just like being in places where like there's no opportunity versus you see the opportunity is there. And you just need to make sure that it's the right time and that you have the right skill sets that are built up for that. I want to ask you about one other thing because in the previous aspect, you said a lot of great stuff there. I want to talk about like the moment when your passion isn't enough, right? I think a lot of time, we spend the majority of our time at work. Like obviously there are a lot of different factors that go in there, but for certain career paths, passion is what ends up driving you to those areas. So I know that sometimes, especially with folks who are in the education system and who are in academia, that passion is a big part of it. But how do you deal with that sentiment of you're running into a lot of brick walls when you still have that fire and passion, but it's being diminished by just constant roadblocks? And how do you admit that to yourself that it just doesn't feel the same anymore and that passion doesn't burn the same way?
Yeah, I think so. One, I'll say that passion isn't forever. Right. And I still have a lot of friends in academia. And I think you have to be careful when passion turns into comfort. Right. When passion, because like I love this thing and I really want to do that, becomes now I'm just comfortable and I know like, OK, next year I'm going to get this step raise and then this step raise and I'm just good with just staying right here. Yeah. That's you just being comfortable. Right. Your passion is the thing that's going to make you want to go above and beyond every day, no matter what anybody's paying you. Right. Yeah. I was there for a solid 6 years. Like I was like, I found my first offer letter for one of my first year teaching. And I was like, how did I live off of this much?
That's another thing.
Yeah. And so, but the thing about it was I was so deep in what I was doing and I wanted to be there. I was also super young. It was before I built my family. And so the thing is like passions, one, can decrease and two, other things can rise up that you become more passionate about. And the hard part is, you have to learn how to know when to break out of your comfort zone to address maybe the new passions, the new things that you want to go after so that you don't become complacent in your career, right? Like I think the days of, my dad worked for the federal government for 40 years and retired, right?
Yeah.
And to this day, we'll probably do like, just stay with the same, like this, it's a different environment now. So you really have to keep your eyes open for what opportunities are going to help you realize the value, even if it's not changing your passion, right? Like I still have a passion for people, but it's just changed where I don't have to exhibit that or demonstrate that passion in a classroom of 30 elementary school or middle school students anymore, right?
Right.
I have other ways to impact. Like I'm on the board of directors for a charter school organization, right? Like I regularly volunteer and go to the community where my school was at, right? Like I was on the phone with one of my 7th grade students from my very first year yesterday or 2 days ago. Talking about like he's trying to break into a certain career and checking on him. Like that's the kind of way I want to continue to have a lasting impact and leverage the passion that I started my career on. That doesn't have to be at the expense of like creating a new path for my family, my kids, my wife, my household. And so they are now my passion, right? And pushing them forward. So it has to move and shake and grow with you.
Yeah. No, for real. Okay, let's shift a little bit and talk about resources. Obviously, your career has kind of taken several different paths to get to where you are right now. And you mentioned network. We always talk about network, right? Network is a huge aspect for it. In this case, your mother-in-law was your network, who was kind of like the gateway into learning about this new career path and being able to kind of explore this. So what were some resources that you used to get up to speed on, the L&D field? What are some resources that you use right now as well? And for people who are interested in learning more or interested in being able to hone their skills or grow a career in this field, what would you say are some things that they could use to do that?
Yeah, for me, again, it started with my mother-in-law, and then I started to just look for different roles. Like, where did these roles exist? Like, was there a concentration of them in a specific space? And then I needed to understand what different titles meant, because the title structures across learning and development can be pretty broad and ambiguous at times. So I was learning about I could be an instructional designer, which is basically like lesson planning or creating e-learnings and all that kind of stuff. And basically the engineer of learning. Now we call them learning experience designers. I could be a trainer, which is you're constantly in front of people training and building trainings, etc. And then there's some more big picture things like learning program manager, which, is kind of like a product owner for a suite or a curriculum of learning experiences, and then again, managers positions across all of those things. And so from there, after I kind of learned or got comfortable with the title structuring, I tried to look for different professional organizations. So I started on LinkedIn and looked for Black folks in L&D or try some stuff, or some of the big national organizations like ATD, I think is for talent development. Right. And so that was, so knowing the different titles helps you be able to find the different organizations that do that work. And then it's just digging into whatever is available for you there. At the same time, while all that's happening, you can learn all you want about it. You got to find the kind of the pressure points in your network that can break you into some of those organizations. So I was blessed. So my wife has been a blessing to me for so many years.
There we go.
The person who got me into being an RA, that got me into TA, was my wife. She recommended me to be an RA, right? She wasn't my wife then, but we were both. And so at the time, I don't know how this worked out, but at the time where I started to really start digging into learning and development, the place where my wife worked had a learning and development position open. So my wife worked at Riot. And so I applied for that role. But here's the fun fact. The role I applied for, I didn't get, right? The role that I applied for was actually a senior manager position. It was higher, and it was, and so again, the only thing my network got me was a talk with the recruiter.
Yeah.
The moment I get a talk with the recruiter, now I have to prove that my previous work can transfer into this position.
Correct. The
sticking point that happened for me here was that they didn't think I could do it at that level of autonomy, given what they wanted to happen in this space.
Right.
And so they were like, but we think that you're a great candidate for this. There's something coming up down the road. So again, if you can have an impression on somebody, if you can really speak to your, people will make a way for you, right? Yep. If they believe in what you have to offer. And that had nothing to do with my wife, because she couldn't participate. The only thing she could get me is the interview. And the recruiter then talked to the hiring manager. I talked to the hiring manager. I talked to the CPO, the chief people officer. And in all those conversations, if you can make an impact and an impression on somebody to the point that they believe in your skills, they'll invest in you whenever they can. And so I was in the, I was positioned in a place where I could speak to the strengths I had, and that planted a seed that then led to a position 6 months later that I then took. So as I was writing the last chapter of my dissertation, I was signing an acceptance letter for a new job. Very scary moment, right? Because I was like leaving what I knew, but it was due to that opportunity to like really demonstrate that the skills I had been proving over my career, I could apply in this new space.
Yeah. Yeah. And having the preparation for that moment is so important, right? And that goes back to just always keeping a tab on what your transferable skills are, right? Being able to know that at any point, I have to present this to somebody and make a good enough impression where they're like, okay, even if it's not right now, I will keep a tab and make sure that I find something for this person because they'd be a good fit for this company. I do it all the time, right? I literally have lists of folks who I speak to who make a good impression, who I may not have a role for, but they have a great skill set. They present the skill set very well. And I'm like, hey, listen, I know eventually at some point, I don't know when it is, we will find something for you. Yeah. So like being able to have that interaction is crucial. And you're not the first person that said that they've gotten a job or they got an internship or they got something based on making that impression. So like you said, your network can only get you a conversation.
Yep.
You have to do the work. And to do the work, especially for the pivot, you have to be prepared for it at almost any moment to be able to do that. And that all goes back to transferable skills.
Yeah. And I want to call it, like, because I know there's going to be somebody who listens and says, oh, yeah, but his wife was there. Blah, blah, blah. I kid you not. That was the opportunity that I pursued the hardest. But I had 2 or 3 other options in L&D that I was turning down by the point that I signed this letter. So, like, it really is about the impression you have. The network is important, but it's not all of it, right? So all those folks who just try to ping everybody they know in LinkedIn working in the spot, that ain't going to do it for you. You still got to come with that, like, you got to be impressionable, if that's the word. Like, you got to really leave a mark on somebody for them to, like, be willing to trust that pivot, trust you with that pivot, right? Because they're putting their stamp of approval to say, like, oh, no, I think you could do this here.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about L&D. I've always thought that the space was really interesting. I took a couple courses in college those were like, at that point, learning, training, and development, understanding a little bit more about how organizations and corporations do this. But obviously, that material was way outdated. But I guess what are some trends that are in this space, and like I guess what are some skill sets that you see that are in high demand in L&D?
Yeah. So one, if you're a great facilitator, that can help at least break in if there is a need for someone to deliver in-person training. But more recently, with the move to hybrid and remote stuff, a lot of what we do now is a combination of different learning modalities, whether they be self-paced e-learnings, a lot of video and media editing, a lot of voiceover, a lot of non-traditional kind of community of practice style learning. So creating podcast branding. So like, I really do think that like this idea of product management and like with learning being your product is a big kind of skill transition both ways even, right? Like I actually have been really kind of tinkering with this idea of like, okay, so if I wanted to not do L&D and I wanted to make a bigger pivot, what is the transition? And for the current role that I work, the current industry I work in right now, it's really product ownership, right? Like I should be able to see the vision and know the outcomes, understand the target audience, and really what impact we're having on that audience, and create a number of different outputs to hyper serve that audience with this product. That's what learning is, right? I have this group of people who can do this, but can't do that. So how do I create an experience that hyper serves this group to be able to do all of this by the time I'm done with them? That's learning. It's about behavior change. It's about serving their needs and filling the gaps between skills that they need and that they currently have, right?
Yeah.
And that's the work that we do. So like, aside from just that core skill, media editing, visual design, UX design, all those things kind of play a part in the like e-learning space, but all of them have to come together in really understanding the impact you're trying to have, the behavioral impact you're trying to have on any given learner.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. And are there any tools that are becoming of prevalence, right? If somebody is interested in breaking into the space, are there some tools that you're like, you really want to have a good foundation in this? Obviously, the field is so broad and there's so many different aspects, as you've just mentioned. But what would you say are some of the things that you would say, any kind of certifications or things like that people should focus on?
I mean, certifications, maybe like adult learning theory, if you can do some stuff on that. And then I would say from the e-learning and like instructional design side, learning, there's a software called Articulate 360, which is, it's like a platform to build e-learnings. And there's I guess there's two sides of the product. There's something called Storyline, which is a little bit more difficult. It's a lot of like coding and programming type stuff that goes into the development of that, but you can do a lot more with it. And then there's something that's a little bit more user friendly, which is called Rise. But the program's called Articulate 360, and that's really kind of the bread and butter for building e-learnings. And then what else? And then honestly, like if you can cut video, cut audio, and add effects and stuff, that's a huge win, because you can do instructional videos. Like think about like the YouTube style of learning is big now. So if you can create a YouTube video that teaches somebody something, you're like halfway down the road.
Yeah.
So
Okay. All right. No, that's definitely really helpful. So obviously this has been a great conversation, but from an advice standpoint, right? If you're giving yourself advice, right? Like before you started pivoting, if you could look back and if you could give yourself advice and pre-pivot, like what would you say is some advice that you would give yourself? And then also, let's also talk about now, like post-pivot, what is some advice that you currently employ in your day-to-day as you're looking forward in your future?
Yeah. So the thing I would have told myself before is don't undervalue your skills. Like don't let anybody define the value of your skills without your input. So like I kick myself all the time. We're thinking like, man, if I had done this 3 years earlier, where would I be at this point? Right. But then I also sit back and realize like things happen for a reason in a time, in a season when they're supposed to happen. So I let the process play itself out. But I do think like if I had taken a stronger point of view of like the things that I bring could offer to any company and valued them higher, would I have been in a different place monetarily or for my family? So that's something I always kick myself. And again, it didn't even have to be moving to a company. Like I could have been teaching classes. I could have had my own platform. I could have done a lot of different things that were relatively low risk, but that really helped realize the value I could bring, I could pull out of my skill set. And so I hope that people don't devalue themselves because of where they're situated. Right? Like don't let the industry you're currently in determine the value of the things you bring to the table, because you can literally go somewhere else and they will pay you double for the same or less of what you're doing in that current place. Yeah. And then for me right now, when you get into a new space, that whole be humble thing is important, because there's going to be some stuff that you have to allow yourself time to grow into. Right. Whether it's like understanding your new peer group, understanding the dynamics of the team you're working with, or literally learning new skills that you just never had to demonstrate before, like giving yourself time and space to grow and fail at times without being too hard on yourself. Right. Yep. I tell managers all the time, like when you shift from being like an IC, like an individual contributor in a thing, to a manager of a thing, it's a big identity shift. Right. Yeah. Like you go from being a coder where your job is to be in the tech stack coding and building things, to now an engineering manager where your job is to help other engineers do that stuff. Like you're not in the code anymore, or if you are, it's very little. Yeah. And so the source of value for you is no longer the thing that you've been doing for 5 or 6 years. Right. That happens again when you go to like a leadership role where like, yeah, you can get in there and block and tackle and solve for folks and fix things quickly and expedite stuff. But no, as a director, you need to be like a little bit higher and looking at the full field and moving resources around, evolving the team and strategizing, not just next month, next year, 2 years from now. You need to be advising and making decisions to make sure that your executives fully know that you got it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of pressure to make sure you get it right. And so giving myself a little grace to say like, hey, it's okay. You're learning, you're figuring it out. And as long as I'm tapped in with my leader and making sure that I'm supported in that way, you're good. Like, don't feel like you got to be perfect.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And what would you say at this point, like for you, like what's next? Like, what would you say is exciting you on the horizon? Like, how are you feeling?
Yeah. You know what? Honestly, I don't, I've been going back and forth with a bunch of people about like what's next. And I think the exciting part for me is I don't have a what's next. Like I'm kind of going along for the ride. Like this is, I'm in that space where I'm just experiencing and living the thing. And when and if I see the opportunity for next, I'm going to go after. That said, I am trying to think about that whole valuing my skills, right? Like I'm learning how I do a lot of coaching, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I pay a lot of coaches to do work for our company. And I'm seeing the value that they are getting from that. And I'm like, okay, so retirement plan, let's figure that out. So definitely like learning the industry, learning the spaces that I can maybe move and shake differently in the future, but not committing to like, this is where I'm going yet. I think it's important for me to just sit in it for a while,
Yeah, absolutely. And man, it's even hard to ask this question because you've given us so much wisdom. But parting words of wisdom, right? For people who are looking to make a similar pivot, like if they're looking to pivot out of education, if they're looking to break into L&D, what would you say are some parting words of wisdom that you would give them, Brandon?
Yeah, just jump, just go, just take the leap, right? Because that momentum will carry you for a while until you figure things out, and then you can really start to fly. Right. Like, so just take the opportunity when it comes to you and trust in yourself as you take that leap.
Yep. Well, there you have it, y'all. There you have it. There you have it. Brandon, thank you so much for making the time here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'm so sorry.
Again, stop.
It took way too long for us to get to this, but this was great, man. I can't wait to see how it all shakes. And I appreciate you for having me.
You have made up for it 12-fold. Thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in. Please remember to like and subscribe for more. Most importantly, pivot powerfully. Be well, everyone.
Peace.